Today we've got a packed lineup of topics you won't want to miss. According to current reports, the PS6 is not expected to be released in 2028, with most speculation pointing towards a 2027 release window, as Sony is likely to finalize the design of the PS6 chip towards the end of 2025 or early 2026, indicating production starting around that time and a release a year later to allow for testing and development. Industry insider Tom Warren says that April is going to be an awesome month for PlayStation gamers. Despite all the talk about PlayStation pushing live service games, it turns out Herman Hulst isn't actually forcing studios to make them. Epic Games recently published a blog post addressing a persistent issue in Unreal Engine 5, stuttering. Digital Foundry explains that part of the solution involves breaking rendering tasks into smaller chunks. Take-Two's CEO Strauss Zelnick finally addressed why GTA 6 isn't launching on PC right away. Avowed Reviews Are Out, and it's looking like a solid RPG, but not exactly a game changer. Assassin's Creed Shadows is already stirring up controversy, and the game isn't even out yet. Let's not waste time and get into the first story. And as always, a like on the video is very much appreciated. Epic Games recently published a blog post addressing a persistent issue in Unreal Engine 5, stuttering. Digital Foundry explains that part of the solution involves breaking rendering tasks into smaller chunks, a method that worked well when games used fewer, less complex shaders. However, modern titles rely on a vastly increased number of shaders, making this approach problematic, especially on PC, where hardware and driver inconsistencies create additional challenges. They also talk about why DirectX 11 was beneficial at a time. It really could actually work and provide stutter-free experiences in games just by the driver doing a lot of the work, but it was also spending a lot of CPU and GPU cycles to make that the case, which is why DX12 made maybe sense at that point in time. Nowadays, if you were to try, and I've talked about this on the channel, if you did throw out a DX11 game with a modern amount of shaders in it, like we see in most games, it will still be stutter central at a lot of points. I saw this really. What was it, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, when Shadow Warrior 3 came out? That was a DX11 game which had shader compilation stutter on PC, and it was really obvious. So it obviously happens under DX11 as well. The part of the blog that I slightly take issue with is the fact that they do say, you know that we've got a lot of it working with Fortnite, and I've shown time and time again that even in the latest version of Fortnite, the game is still really stuttery for your first couple of gameplay sessions. They kind of point out that there are global shaders that their current system still doesn't take care of. So they're not living up to their bargain there. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Fortnite still struggles, due to global shaders not being included in the PSO caching scheme. I've also heard from multiple developers behind the scenes. These are people who are really technically minded, that the systems they've provided to developers didn't necessarily function correctly from versions 5.1 to 5.4. If you tried to hook them up, you had to do specialized work to actually make them function. Maybe they've heard that internal feedback from people who are actually very gifted at working with these things. But what I've also heard from multiple people behind the scenes, that it actually didn't work as advertised. They had to do specific work to make it work for their games. That is another thing. There was one part of this blog that I really like though. I mean, they're saying they're going to work on this in the future. Global shaders will be done. They say at the end that they are going to work toward a system that is potentially more invisible to the developer, where they don't have to do much of anything at all to make a game stutter-free on PC. I feel that is the ultimate goal for this. They also say, we are also working with hardware and software vendors to adapt drivers and graphics APIs to the way games use these systems in practice. The thing is, I feel like the design of DX12 doesn't fit with the modern context of how games are developed. It doesn't make sense to force developers to figure out this entire thing every time they make a game, when there could be an API designed around it, either by bundling shader pre-compilation differently or having it be less intense, like the whole system that was introduced into Vulkan most recently. I feel like there's a large, complex system here, and while I don't think Epic is wholly at fault for this year, they've been that fault for a long period of time. It's not a great situation, but I'm generally very happy that they are explicitly talking about it on the Unreal Engine blog. Apparently there was a stream last night that went into it as well, which which I haven't been able to watch just yet. It's good to see that my beating the drum. And all the developers and game players out there talking about wanting stutter-free experiences can potentially have large-reaching consequences, where Epic is now really going to be focusing on it in a better way. So hopefully there can be some widespread resolution of this issue across UE5 developers. There does seem to be at least a will to actually do something positive about it. And I guess it starts with this blog post. Despite all the talk about PlayStation pushing live service games, it turns out Hermen Hulst isn't actually forcing studios to make them. At least that's what former PlayStation Studios CEO Shuhei Yoshida is saying. In an interview with Sacred Symbols Plus, as reported by Push Square, Yoshida made it clear that while the big live service push definitely influenced some studios, no one is being outright forced into it. Instead, the idea is that when a company is backing a big initiative, studios naturally want to jump on board because it gives them a better chance of getting their projects greenlit. That would explain why so many teams were suddenly working on live service projects that never actually saw the light of day, like The Last of Us Online. Yoshida even confirmed that he played it and thought it was great, but after Bungie sat down with Naughty Dog and explained what it actually takes to support a live service game, they realized they couldn't do it alongside their upcoming sci-fi single-player title, Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet, so they scrapped it. The live service initiative as a whole hasn't really panned out for PlayStation's internal studios. Concord was a complete failure, shutting down not long after launch. Other projects, like a rumored God of War live service game from Bluepoint, have also been canceled. The only real success has been Helldivers 2, but that's not even made by a PlayStation-owned studio. It's from Arrowhead. So while Sony clearly wanted to make live service games a major part of their strategy, the reality is looking very different. With so many cancellations and missteps, is PlayStation finally backing off from the live service gamble, or are they just regrouping for another push? So Take-Two's CEO Strauss Zelnick finally addressed why GTA 6 isn't launching on PC right away. And yeah, it's exactly what we expected. He basically confirmed that their usual strategy is to release on consoles first, then expand later, something they've done before with GTA 5. Now, officially, they say there are a few reasons for this. Piracy concerns. They've repeatedly said that PC piracy is a big issue. And yeah, technically you can pirate games on console, but let's be real. 99.9% of console players aren't jailbreaking their systems. Meanwhile, on PC, cracked versions spread fast, especially for games as big as GTA 6. Optimization challenges. Consoles are easier to develop for since there are only a few hardware variations. PC, on the other hand, has tons of different setups, which makes optimization way more complicated. So they say they need more time to make sure the PC version runs well. But the real reason? Double dipping. Let's be honest, the biggest reason is money. If they release on PC later, they get to sell the game twice, or 3 times, or 4. First, everyone rushes to buy it on PlayStation 5 and Xbox. Then, a year or so later, they drop a super enhanced PC version, and suddenly everyone buys it again to play with better graphics and mods. This is exactly what they did with GTA 5. First on PlayStation 3 and 360, then PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, then PC, then PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. And you know, it won't stop there. After PC, it'll eventually come to whatever the next PlayStation and Xbox are. And when the Switch 3 is powerful enough, boom, GTA 6 Portable Edition. At the end of the day, you can't even be mad because it works. GTA 6 supposedly cost around $1 to $2 billion to make, so they need to milk it however they can. But that's the real question. Will it be good enough to justify all this? If it's another masterpiece like GTA 5, people will happily buy it multiple times. But if it disappoints, that's a whole different conversation. Alright, so this is kinda hilarious, but also just really sad when you think about it. So you know those YouTubers who make everything about how woke gaming is ruining everything and just constantly push outrage content? Yeah, one of those guys just got completely exposed for running with a fake Assassin's Creed Shadows delay story without even bothering to check if it was real. So here's what happened. Some guy sent this YouTuber an email claiming to be an exclusive Ubisoft insider and told him that AC Shadows was delayed to May 2025. The YouTuber, instead of verifying anything, just made a whole breaking news video acting like it was a legit scoop. Turns out, it was completely fake. The guy who sent the email, McDizzle Gaming, straight up admitted that he did it on purpose to prove how lazy and bad faith some of these content creators are. And it worked worked perfectly. McDizzle even posted the email he sent as proof, showing that the YouTuber didn't ask for verification, didn't double-check with any sources, didn't reach out to Ubisoft. Nothing. He just saw something that fit the narrative he wanted to push and ran with it. And this isn't even an isolated case. McDizzle also exposed another one of this guy's so-called BioWare insiders, who later admitted they were just messing with him. And what's even funnier is that even after getting completely caught, the YouTuber's response wasn't to apologize or take down the video. Nope. He just doubled down saying, well, I'll wait until it's official. Dude, it was never real to begin with. This is exactly why gaming news can be such a mess. There are people who want to believe certain things so badly that they won't even question whether it's true. They just see a headline or a random Twitter post that aligns with their narrative and treat it as fact. And it's not just stupidity, it's deliberate. Some of these YouTubers don't actually care if what they say is true. Their whole brand is built around finding things to be angry about. So if they see something that fuels that, they're gonna run with it. Like, imagine if I just made up some nonsense about GTA 6 being delayed to 2026 and emailed it to one of these guys. They'd probably make a whole video about it within the hour. And the worst part, even if they got caught, the original fake story would still spread. Because once something hits YouTube, people take it as gospel. Honestly, it kind of makes me want to troll some of these guys myself, just to see how easy it is. But like, isn't it insane that you could do that? That you could literally just make something up, send it in an email, and suddenly it's news.
When this happened to Nick Calandra with the whole Gigabear Grumps thing, they were like, oh my God, look at this year on the list. Oh my God, they fall for anything. They have no standards. But now it's, well, Smash was convinced of the alleged by the alleged source. Hey, part of your job as a journalist is to vet your sources. That is why journalists do not rush, journalists worth their salt at least, do not rush to just put out anything. Because A, if they print it, that is libel and they can get sued. And B, credibility is their bread and butter. They need to be credible. That is why people like Jason Schreier or like Tom Henderson have pull, they have clout. And so people will actually actively seek them out to get a story out because people will believe it. Otherwise, we'd all believe in Bigfoot because the National Enquirer posted it like 40 years ago.
So Assassin's Creed Shadows is already stirring up controversy, and the game isn't even out yet. This time, it's about a scene where players can destroy the Itate Hyozu Shrine, which is an actual real-life location. The backlash was so big that the shrine's representatives are now saying they'll take appropriate action against Ubisoft. What that actually means, no one knows yet. According to a report from Sankai News via Automaton, the shrine reps confirmed that Ubisoft never contacted them before putting the location in the game. And when asked if they would have given permission, they flat out said no. If there had been, they would have refused. Now, obviously, this has sparked a huge debate online. Some people are saying it's disrespectful to Japanese culture and that destroying a real-world shrine shouldn't even be an option in the game. Others argue that it's just part of player freedom. Like, yeah, you can do it, but that doesn't mean you have to. Then, of course, there are the people bringing up past Assassin's Creed games, like how you literally fistfight the Pope in AC2, or how religious sites have been featured and attacked in the series for years without this kind of reaction. And honestly, it's a bit of a weird situation. Ubisoft has always played fast and loose with historical settings, and this isn't the first time they've let players mess with real-world locations. But at the same time, Japan is extremely protective of its historical landmarks and shrines. Meanwhile, Ubisoft is still sticking to the March 20th release date, and apparently pre-orders are on track with AC Odyssey. So even with all this drama, the game isn't slowing down. But the question is, will Ubisoft actually change anything, or are they just gonna ride this controversy out?
Mahatma Gandhi, a real-life historical figure whose entire leadership was influenced by the Apple of Eden. Jesus Christ, who wielded a Shroud of Eden, and after his crucifixion, his disciples tried to resurrect him with said Shroud of Eden. Adolf Hitler, a man who wielded a piece of Eden, was also being controlled by the literal Templar Order. Let's go with one more. JFK, a president who is being controlled by the Templars, an assassination orchestrated by both assassins and Templars, and an Apple of Eden at the heart of it all. These are just a few examples of the many ways Assassin's Creed has altered real-life events and real-life people to fit the work of fiction disclaimer that appears at the start of every single game in the series. But all of this is pointless, and it brings me to my point. Why did I mention any of this? Well, because Assassin's Creed Shadows, the 14th mainline entry in an 18-year franchise, is now a victim of manufactured outrage, blatant misinformation, and an absurd number of nitpicking, especially to do with historical accuracy. And why? Well, the real answer that isn't related to
So Avowed Reviews Are Out, and it's looking like a solid RPG, but not exactly a game changer. It's sitting at around 80 on Metacritic and 81 on OpenCritic, which is basically saying, yeah, it's good, but don't expect it to blow your mind. If you were hoping for the Elder Scrolls 6, but with Obsidian writing, well, it's not quite that. But if you just want a fun, well-made fantasy RPG, it sounds like it delivers. So, what's the verdict? Let's break it down. Most reviewers seem to agree that Obsidian's storytelling chops are still top tier. Xbox Era gave it an 8.8 out of 10 and said Obsidian's top-tier writing has finally been matched with gorgeous visuals and satisfying gameplay. That's a big deal, because while their games are usually known for great writing, their gameplay sometimes struggles. The Outer Worlds, for example, felt a little stiff at times. But here it sounds like they finally nailed the action RPG formula. Combat also seems to be a highlight. GameSpot, despite giving it a lower score, actually praised the combat, calling it impactful and satisfying. So yeah, whether you're swinging swords, slinging spells, or mixing both, it sounds like it's fun to play moment to moment. And then there's the world. Eurogamer gave it a 4 out of 5 and describes it as a game with charm depth and a playful heart. They mention that while it's not as big or open as Skyrim, it still feels rich and full of life. You've got that signature Obsidian storytelling, moral choices, and layered quests that make the world feel more reactive. This is where things get interesting. A lot of the lower scores aren't actually saying the game is bad, just that it doesn't really bring anything new to the table. IGN gave it a 7 out of 10 and said Avowed is a perfectly competent RPG that showcases Obsidian's writing and world-building chops, but has little else to distinguish itself among swords and sorcery adventures. That seems to be a common sentiment. It does everything well, but nothing about it screams groundbreaking. One specific criticism is the gear progression system, which Xbox Era called too restrictive at launch. Apparently, leveling up and upgrading your character doesn't feel as rewarding as it should, which is something that might get patched later. Another issue is party combat. Games Radar gave it a 4 out of 5 and mentioned that overlooking its forgettable party combat system and some minor quality of life misses, Avowed deserves to be remembered as one of this year's best games. Basically, it sounds like your companions don't add as much to the gameplay as they should. So if you were hoping for deep tactical combat like Dragon Age, you might be a little disappointed. Is it worth playing? If you're into first-person RPGs and love Obsidian's storytelling, then yeah, this seems like a no-brainer, especially since it's on Game Pass. Gamerguides gave it an 84 out of 100 and summed it up best. Avowed continues Obsidian's tradition of creating excellent RPGs that feel heavily linked to well-trodden genres, yet not doing quite enough to carve out a new identity. So it's fun, well-written, and engaging, but don't expect it to reinvent the genre. Honestly, this kind of reminds me of the Outer Worlds all over again. Good writing, good gameplay, but not quite reaching the heights of the games that inspired it. The big question is, do you need an RPG to innovate, or is just executing the formula well enough? So this whole Christopher Barret lawsuit against Sony just took a turn. Sony fired back, saying his termination was justified and calling his lawsuit meritless. And to back it up, they dropped some pretty serious allegations about inappropriate behavior towards female employees. The accusations include things like drunk late-night calls, pressuring women into playing sexually charged games of Truth or Dare, and making comments about their relationships and appearances. Sony says they did a thorough investigation and found a pattern of him pushing boundaries with female employees, starting with friendly conversations and then escalating from there. Barret, on the other hand, is claiming this is all just an excuse to avoid paying him the $45 million he was still owed. His lawyers are saying Sony is cherry-picking messages, taking things out of context, and trying to ruin his reputation to cover up their own business failures. And the money here is kinda insane. Barret was already paid almost $38 million after Sony bought Bungie, but he was set to get another $45 million over the next couple of years. Meanwhile, Bungie laid off a bunch of employees in 2023 and 2024, cutting people who were well known in the Destiny community. So while some people were getting kicked to the curb, Barret was still set to make tens of millions until he got fired. Sony is now trying to get most of his lawsuit thrown out, saying they'll fight it all the way. But if Barret really has the evidence to prove Sony fired him just to dodge a payout, this could get messy. So is this another case of a big company using accusations to avoid a massive payout? Or is Sony actually trying to hold someone accountable for bad behavior. So Sony is quietly rolling out a new PlayStation 5 firmware update for beta testers, but they haven't made an official announcement yet. A bunch of users on Reset Era are reporting that they've gotten emails about it, and from what's being shared, it doesn't look like a huge update, more like small tweaks and quality of life improvements. The beta patch apparently includes better activity tracking, support for Unicode 16.0 emojis, stability improvements, updates to parental control settings, and some UI refinements. Pretty standard stuff, but as always, there's no official word on when this update will roll out to everyone. The last major firmware update dropped in December and added the PlayStation 1-inspired 30th anniversary themes, which a lot of players loved. But then Sony randomly removed them, which led to a bunch of complaints. Now, they've confirmed the themes will come back permanently at some point, but at the same time, they also said they have no plans to add any new themes beyond that, which was kind of a letdown. Meanwhile, rumors about the PlayStation 6 are heating up again. A leaker who correctly revealed details about the PS5 Pro is now claiming that the PS6 is already design complete and currently in the pre-silicon validation phase. If this report is accurate, Sony could be targeting a late 2027 release for the next-gen console, meaning we're less than 3 years away from the PlayStation 6. But of course, things could change and internal delays could easily push it into 2028. Industry insider Tom Warren says that April is going to be an awesome month for PlayStation gamers. And for anyone looking to pick up some new PS5 accessories, Sony just launched a Midnight Black lineup, which includes the DualSense Edge wireless controller, PlayStation Portal, Pulse Explore wireless earbuds, and Pulse Elite wireless headset. They officially dropped on February 20th and are available on PlayStation Direct. If you want to be ahead of all the gaming leaks and news, specifically PlayStation news, time for you to subscribe. And as always, a like on the video is very much appreciated.